Everyone wants to feel that their work has purpose. And especially if people think, hey, it's just going into the black hole. Numbers are going to get sloppy. They're going to get rushed if they even get in there at all. And all of that rolls up to the ability for middle management leadership to make the right decisions. And if your data is not very good, your decision-making won't be either.
Welcome to the Made Leader Podcast, where exceptional leadership isn't about who you are, but who you choose to become. Join your host, Jen Arnold, for expert interviews, real-world stories, and practical advice that transforms managers into exceptional leaders. If you're a middle manager ready to unlock your potential, this is your podcast. Let's get started.
Hey there, and welcome to another episode of the Made Leader Podcast. I'm your host, Jen Arnold. Today, we're diving into the world of project management. I know it doesn't sound sexy, but don't worry, we're going to keep it practical and real. Now, let me introduce today's guest, Paul Koetke. He is founder of Koetke Consulting and a certified smart sheet expert who's helped over 100 organizations transform their messy project management into streamlined automated systems that actually work. Now, if you're like most middle managers, you're probably trying to juggle all the projects and deliverables across your team. Or maybe you're drowning in status updates that nobody actually reads. Now, if that is you, then please listen up. Today, Paul shares some no-nonsense approaches to manage projects across your team without actually micromanaging them, how to create processes that reduce your workload instead of adding to it, how you can communicate up, down, and across the organization without actually wasting your time, and turn dreaded status update meetings into something that is actually useful. So whether you're a project management pro, or maybe the thought of creating a process makes you kind of go dead inside, there's something here for you, I promise. Now, real quick, before I dive into the interview with Paul, I want to let you know about a new offering I have called the Made Leader Community. And it's for leaders in their first few years, about 3 years of management. Now, over 3 months, we are going to work together to master the tricky transition between being the player and doing the work to being the coach and leading your people. We're going to talk about what builds high-performance teams, and I'll help you be able to say the things that need to be said with your team in a way that feels authentic to you. So it is a 3-month program. And in this 3 months, you're going to get live workshops, group coaching, and a supportive community to get you through all of the many challenges that come up in leadership. And because it's not run by your company, it's run by me, it's an outsider, you can say the things that are really on your mind without the filter. We kick off in June 2025 with a small group of motivated leaders like yourself. You can head to growthsignals.co. I'll put the link in the show notes and grab your spot before they're gone because I am only accepting 25 people for this series. Now, without further ado, let's jump right into my interview with Paul Koetke. Paul, welcome to the Made Leader Podcast. I'm so glad to have you on today.
Hey, thanks for having me on, Jen.
And we don't want to scare anyone to talk about, project management. That is your expertise. And it's a reality that leaders are typically juggling multiple deliverables, and it spans across their team. So when you think about project management skills that are practical, that middle managers can use to keep track of these deliverables among their team, but without micromanaging them, what would some of those skills be?
When you're managing work, and we don't have to call it a project if you're not a technical project manager, but when you're managing work, there are 3 things I find that work really, really well. So the first is focusing on that day-to-day work. Oftentimes we tend to become a little bit obsessed with the end goal, with the deadline, and in the middle, maybe we get a little bit too relaxed. That's the time to make sure that we are continuing to keep moving forward, keep making progress, so that when we come up to that end point, we've done everything, everything's ready to go, and that deadline's smooth and easy to hit. Second piece here is going to be making sure that your team has the tools and resources they need, and not setting unrealistic expectations without making sure that it's achievable and everyone knows how to contribute and do their part to get to that finish point. And then the last piece here is going to be to build strong processes together. So figuring out what that work is going to look like, who's going to do which parts, and how it's going to get done, so that there aren't questions at the last minute of figuring out, oh, wait, I was supposed to do this. You were supposed to do that. We both did the same thing. So make sure that's all communicated early and upfront.
Yeah, I think that's what I see happen a lot is that there's an idea, but then there's not, or even we'll call it a project or a deliverable, but it's not clear
Mm-hmm.
who's responsible for what. That's a
Mm-hmm.
big one. And I think, too, what you just said is at the very beginning, making sure that they have everything they need.
Yep.
And is there a way that you suggest doing that other than just asking them? Is there some kind of strategy you have that you use?
Ooh, to figure out if everyone has what they need.
Yeah, is it like literally just asking them, like, here's the goal, here's what we're trying to accomplish, and do you have what you need? Is it that simple?
I think it depends on what the process is going to be and how the work's being assigned out. And it can go one of two ways here. In certain cases, it might just be individual deliverables that people have to bring back and accomplish. And you might say, hey, you can figure it out and do it however you want. I'm not going to tell you how to do it and micromanage you on every little step of the way, but just come back with whatever you need. And if you need additional support, I'm here to help or provide those resources to you. That works well if everyone can bring their pieces and act as individual contributors to a larger whole. But when things get more complex and we have multiple people working together as a team to deliver on different facets together, at that point, we need to decide what's that standard process going to look like. And in that case, we need to be a little more prescriptive of saying, hey, we're going to manage it here and we're going to do these steps and we're all going to work together as a team through this entire process end to end. It really depends on your management style and the style of the project that's going to dictate which approach you take.
Okay, so let's get into these standard processes
Mm-hmm.
because I'm a big fan of processes and I find that there's, breakdowns that I see among teams. There's the people piece, the interpersonal piece of it, but then there's also just not clear processes, right, for decision making, for how to do things, those type things. So how do you recommend that a leader would even get started on processes? I'm going to ask two questions in one and we can
Mm-hmm.
break them down or you can answer whichever one you want. Because I feel like there's the processes with managing the work, but there's also just regular processes for the day, what you talk about the day to day, how the team works together. And do you
Yep.
see differences in those processes and how they're established?
Absolutely. I think before we can establish processes, we need to establish a foundation around making sure that everyone's speaking the same language. So even just coming in and saying, hey, what is a project? Can we agree on what that means? Is that a years-long activity? Or is that something that could take place on a matter of weeks? Let's make sure we're speaking the same language and have common definitions of the key terminology that we're using. This can vary company by company. It can vary team by team. A big one is, what does a red, yellow, green status ball mean? Does red mean that we're overdue? Does red mean the project has been stopped? Or does red mean like, hey, this is a high priority, it needs some help? Let's have a conversation around that. Once we have that in place, we can start standardizing our formats and saying, hey, we're going to use, whatever platform of choice you choose. And then within there, now we can start building out that process to say, hey, we're going to have different phases of our project. Here's what they're going to do. Here are the steps that we're going to take. And we're going to do this on all of our projects. So we've got a standard format that we're following. And we've got repeatability, but then also cross-trainability to make sure that when people are out sick or out on leave, that you can hop between different projects and manage them the same way, but then also be able to report out on them consistently. So all of that together is starting to define your process within project management scope.
Okay. I like what you said about just getting the right language because how many times are we talking about we're arguing about two different definitions and we don't know we're arguing about it or not
Yep.
don't understand it. So I love that you said that. So two things just stood out to me. You talked about a process for things that you can repeat and then things that may need cross-training. Those were two good examples. For example, I'm working with a team and they like one section of their team regularly does webinars. I'm like, is there not a process for this? Like it is, this should be a standard on the team. So to me, it's like, oh, okay, that's obvious. But what else if a leader is looking at, maybe I should have some processes. If they're looking at tasks that are repeatable and you may want to cross-train your team, are there any other standards that they should consider to say, yes, this can be a process?
The repeatability one is huge. There's a lot of incentive to standardize a process and define a process when you're going to get those economies of scale going forward. You can also standardize things that are not necessarily repeatable in the sense of a repeated project, but rather just the way that things are brought up. So a common practice is using something called a RAID log, or you can call it a risk or issues tracker, but making sure you have a standard process for recording these non-standard things that come up and say, hey, we've got a potential issue that could come up. Maybe there's new regulations coming into play that we need to be aware of that could affect how how new product launch goes or something. Let's just track that and have a place that we can go back and refer to it and make sure that someone's responsible for keeping track of that and providing any updates as they come into play as well, too.
Okay. Yeah, I like that there are things that can be non-repeatable. I think these maybe if people could just leaders can just look at what the work is for their team and just think about right there from a basic, what can we actually create a process from? But for the people who are going process, I hate processes. Like that sounds like, inside they're like going dying inside. What can you say that would convince a non-process oriented leader to say, oh yeah, Paul, that's a good idea. Why?
Yep. I have seen that so many times where, you say the word project management and a couple people just kind of cringe and it's like, oh no, why am I stuck here now? What I would say here is when we're talking process or project management, at the end of the day, this is a communication tool. This is to help you better communicate with your team, better communicate with leadership, and allow you to spend less time in the weeds doing the work, managing everything, and allow you more time to do what you're here to do in your role, which is probably not updating project plans and collecting updates from everyone all the time. So if we can streamline that, make it better, make it easier, it's going to make everything else better as well too. I'll also add on that there is not one strict definition of project management and how it has to work. A big part of that is finding what works well for you and what works well for your team and finding that happy middle ground.
Yeah, I like what you said about it's a communication tool and getting out of the weeds, because I don't know any middle manager that isn't in the weeds that wants to get out of it. So I think that's a good selling point, Paul.
Yeah,
but
no one likes being in the weeds.
I think people,
even project managers.
I think people do. I'll challenge that a little bit. I think some people, that's their safe spot in the weeds, and they like being in the weeds because then they don't have to do the things they're not as good at. So I think no one says they like being in the weeds. How about that?
That's fair. I like that point. You're spot on there.
So the other thing you said was about giving leadership some updates on what your team is doing. So of course, when you think about middle managers are trying to get the team, right? You said to give them the tools and resources they need to ultimately move the work forward. But then you've got this person over you who has a vision, right? And sometimes they don't match. So how do you use some of this project management, these tools that you speak of, to manage up effectively? And before, I just want to put this fine point, because one of the things that I've seen from middle managers is they will give all the details. And when you get higher in ranks, nobody wants all the details. So it's trying to figure out where's that sweet spot between informing and overwhelming. So what are your thoughts?
So this is a question I get from every single client that I work with. They say, hey, Paul, you do this as a career, as a business. How do I report this information up to my leadership in a way that they're going to understand it? And they always are looking to me to have all these answers for them. The first thing I do is say, hey, let's have a conversation with that leader Or let's have a conversation with that larger stakeholder group and ask them what they want. Step one is making sure that we're providing the right information. We already know who we're providing it to. Let's make sure we're answering the questions that they are asking. Now, the second piece of this is going to be around the format. So once we know what they want to see how many projects are in the pipeline, what statuses they're in, anything that's at risk, things like that. We want to make sure that it's in an easily consumable format. So where I always turn to, the industry has absolutely nailed this, has been the newspaper industry. Now everything's online, but the principles stay exactly the same. The top of your newspaper, you're going to have a couple big headlines. 8 projects currently in delivery, 3 going live at the end of next month. That's the first line of your report. You can do this in a dashboard. You can do this in a PowerPoint slide. You can do it in an email. And then down from there, as we read down a newspaper, we get more and more detail. So maybe, hey, here's a quick little overview of the 2 projects that are currently struggling, and here's why they're struggling. And then we can add more information down below that to say, okay, here are all the tasks that are overdue across all of our projects and who they're assigned to and why they're stuck or overdue. But what this allows us to do is create a report style where leadership can come in, and if they have 30 seconds, they get the information they need. If they have 5 minutes, they can get the information they need. And if they have a whole half hour between meetings, they can read everything down to the last detail to get the information that they need. So allowing it to be an adaptable format that fits into the cracks in their schedule and meets them where they are.
Yes, I like that you said the headline, because headlines are the most important. What is the key piece of information that you want your boss to know? I've always had leaders who wanted to stay at the pretty high level. They didn't need to get into the, the nitty gritty of things. But I think it's also important to ask them, right? Because what you deem as important, they may not even care anything about. So I think that's a really good point about just ask. And what if they don't know? What if you ask them and they're like, yeah, I don't know, just write up some stuff.
Yeah.
How do you go about that?
This is where you take a little more proactive approach and kind of start managing upward and say, okay, well, here's what I think would be important. If someone were to ask me what I think is important, it's going to be this. Let me distill that down to maybe more of a leadership view. Present it to them and get their opinions on it. Some people are very visual processors of information. And sometimes the theoretical might be a little bit hard to grasp, but they haven't really prepared for it, haven't thought through exactly what they want to see. But I find that most people, when you put something in front of them, they'll be able to look across there and say, this is good. I don't need that. Ooh, I want more information about this. And then take that feedback, adjust it, and repeat that process till they're saying, this is pretty sweet. I'm seeing everything that I need. But then also be cognizant too. If you're sending this out maybe as an email format, and you're getting a reply back asking for a certain piece of information, that might be a cue that is lacking from your original structure.
Yeah, I like that you should just get a reaction, right? Just be proactive, put something together. Because I know my husband got a request from his boss, and it was like, hey, can you put this together, this report? And of course, Steve was like, do you have any detail? Do you know what you want? And he's like, no, not really. Just put something together. So he's like, all right, took a stab at it. And then his boss was like, yeah, really not what I was looking for. We need to do this. So it was a little bit of a frustrating process, but he didn't really know what he needed. His boss didn't know what he needed. And he had to come with something to say, nope, not that. But at least, like you said, it gives them a starting point to go forward to maybe a more acceptable format. I know I'm better at reacting.
Yeah. And sometimes you're just learning together and finding out, hey, where is this overlap between our 2 roles and what needs to happen at that point? It's not always clear cut and defined, and can take a little bit of effort to find out, hey, this is really the optimal intersection point.
And so when we were talking about processes before for your team, assuming if you have those in place, is that where you can also gather information from your team? Because I know I've been on teams where, everyone's reporting up to some report and you have to get something in on a certain deadline, and it was kind of clear. But I've also seen if you ask for information from your team, you could get a freaking novel. So how do you also get what you need from your team, assuming you don't have all these great project management processes in place?
Yep. I think a big part of it's doing the same thing that you're doing in reverse order. Draw up that newspaper of what information you want to be able to see and show your team. Say, hey, this is what's important to me. What that's going to do is set clear guidelines as to what information they need to collect. It's also going to tell them what they don't need to collect. And this is really powerful when you're looking at this from a motivation perspective, because I find so many times project managers or individual contributors are coming in and saying, man, I have to submit all this information, put in all these dates and everything. And I feel like it just goes into a black hole and no one ever sees it.
Mm-hmm.
So show them what's on the other side of, the other side of the wall here, where that information's going and how it's being used. And that's going to align your visions together and give a sense of importance to the work that is important. And maybe some of the other stuff, we can let it slide. Maybe it's not a critical part of the process. And, but we know what is critical. We know that information is going to be there on time.
Yes, I think that is important to lay it out as best you can to show them the why behind it, because people need to see that for sure.
Yes. Everyone wants to feel that their work has purpose. And especially if people think, hey, it's just going into the black hole, numbers are going to get sloppy. They're going to get rushed if they even get in there at all. And all of that rolls up to the ability for middle management leadership to make the right decisions. And if your data is not very good, your decision-making won't be either.
Right. Well, we talked about from an internal team perspective and from a managing up perspective, but a lot of leaders work across the organization and they have stakeholders that are in different departments, right? That they either need to give them information or get information from. So what's your advice for getting the information to or from your stakeholders at the right time and the right, I guess, volume, if you will?
Yep. So, that comes down to getting the right information to the right people at the right time. Going through and defining those stakeholder groups is the key first step there, to make sure that we know who they are and then what they need and then when they need it by as well too. So first step is going to be agreeing on that standard terminology, setting up your standard processes across all of that, getting that foundation. Next piece here, if you can do it, set up a single source of truth that we know that all marketing projects are stored over here. All product development projects are stored over there. We're not tracking things in different places where you end up duplicating work, potentially having conflicting information. This is one thing that I really love about the platform that I work in called Smartsheet is you can create these live links. So there's one piece of data that is then propagated throughout the rest of your system. And if you can do that, that's really going to help a lot with the trust of your data. And the other piece here too, integrate and automate. If you have the ability to integrate between different platforms so that you're not manually reporting on those separately, you can set up a live connection between those and information from one place is feeding another so that different teams can communicate, but then in the platforms that they're most comfortable in. That's going to be huge. And then being able to automate that as much as you can. Getting these reports out, if you're doing something on a weekly basis, by the time that report's been sent out and then consumed a couple days later, it's already stale and obsolete. If you can automate these connections and get that information in real time, it's going to make a big, big difference to keeping everyone up to date together.
All right. So I may need some more specific examples because when you were just talking about all the systems, you lost me in my non-project management brain. So if we were talking about let's just say a middle manager, which I don't even know what system, so many people use Outlook systems, right? Like the Microsoft systems. What does that look like?
Yeah. So if we're talking Microsoft here, a lot of project management tools, Smartsheet definitely does, has the ability to post a dashboard directly in a Teams channel. So if you're working cross-collaboratively with other departments and you want to be able to say, hey, marketing team, I'm over here in product development and we're working on these projects that we're going to need your assistance on. Here's all the information. Post it right there. Don't send them off to some other link and have them have to mark that in their browser. Keep that integrated. Keep it in a central place that's easy to access for everyone involved.
Got you. So some kind of common channel as opposed to in your folder somewhere, in their folder somewhere. Okay.
Yep. Yep. Exactly. And then allow them to go in and make their updates as well, too.
Okay. So they should be able to do that on both ends. Okay.
Yep. Yep.
So let's just say people have put in processes, or maybe they have some old, outdated processes. So let me ask you one question first. How often do you recommend leaders take a look at their processes?
It's one of these things where you don't really know things are broken until it's maybe too late. I think a good sounding board can be when you have new people joining the organization to get a fresh perspective, because if you've been around this for a couple of years or, even longer than that, you become a little bit too close to the situation and to be able to see everything clearly. But I don't know that there's any particular time frame like saying, hey, look at this monthly or quarterly or annually per se. If everything is working well, then hey, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But I think you also get some of these creeping red flags that start to come in here. It's like, oh man, I'm spending an hour or two every week just collecting information to report on. That's cue that maybe that shouldn't be there. That should be seamless and be automated for you.
Mm-hmm. I like the onboarding one because I think that is usually if new people come in and they're like, well, you either have to train them on how to do something, right? That could be a process right there. Or they're coming in going, where's the process? Where do I go locate this, right? Because it's nowhere to be found.
Yeah. And
or at times.
It maybe, I think oftentimes people who are new might be a little bit hesitant to openly share, hey, this process looks pretty terrible. But I would say, be cognizant of how you're explaining this. If you're walking into this and be like, all right, this is going to take us multiple hours for me to explain how this is going to work, and it's going to be like 150 different steps that you're going to have to memorize. That's another cue that, hey, this isn't actually too simple. But if you're able to bring someone in and say, all right, we're going to spend 30 minutes here and we're going to walk end to end through our process and how it works, that sounds pretty good. That's realistic for someone to be able to learn and pick up pretty quickly.
Yeah, and there are some places, I know where I used to work, we had a whole PMO, project management office, that could come in and do some of this work for you if they weren't deployed to a bigger project. So if organizations have that, to go tap into that, or, maybe there's someone who can facilitate. Yeah. Yeah. Or even just walking through what's a process, what seems painful. What do you do all the time that you're not, that you don't have some kind of process for? I mean, I talk about even just as simple as team meetings. Have an agenda, right? Have a structured agenda. Well, you don't need to go back and do that every single time. Like some of these things that are just, you forget can be systematized or put in a process for them. And it can take some work off of you that you don't need to do every week or every month.
One of the huge things that I see with a lot of my clients is that team meetings essentially go away. If you're setting all this up and you've got dashboards showing people, hey, here's the status on this project, here's the status on that project, here's what we need, rather than waiting for your weekly team meeting to go in and say, hey, last week we discovered that something is going to be late. I need additional support to get this done. That's showing in a dashboard directly. You can address it right then and there, and leadership's going to be able to see that. So then the team meetings, if you even have them, at that point are, hey, I've read all the information. I know the status of everything. I just want to know A, B, or C. And it's not a meeting to deliver updates, but rather a meeting to get things done and take action.
Yeah, I'm a huge advocate for no team meetings, just for status updates. Those are painful and, make me want to stick a needle in my head. Do not
rip all your hair out.
Yes. Well, okay. So I'm going to get a little tactical with you. So let's just say all the deliverables are going. You've got your processes in place. And I'm guessing this is part of the problem. I may answer my own question. Who's monitoring that? So let's just say then it's up to each person to say, I'm going to go check on what's going on the dashboard. If something's behind, then it's clear maybe who's responsible for that, versus the leader looking and then saying, hey, Paul, I've noticed this is, we're on red status for this. What's going on? Like, is that all vetted out in the processes? Like, who's monitoring all of this?
Yeah.
The project, if you will.
If you build it well, everyone will have a view into what they're responsible for, down to the individual contributor all the way up to the highest levels of leadership. So we're making sure that we get the right information, the right people at the right time. And as long as they are logging in and saying, hey, I need to go check the system. And for my clients, that system is always Smartsheet, but it could be anything else. They should be able to see at a glance, here's what I'm responsible for. Here's maybe something that I've missed, something that slipped through the cracks. But then also be able to surface that to the people who can help support you. So if that is your direct manager, they should be aware that someone is, maybe needing additional support. But it shouldn't be something where you have to go digging through and finding information. It should be neatly presented to each person as they need it.
Got you. Okay. Yes, it's all embedded into the process. But yeah, I'd say team meetings then can be used for something much more strategic or
absolutely
building,
or even just getting work done. Yeah.
Right. I mean, there's so many times so this can take away the dreaded status updates at meetings, which is good.
Yep. Absolutely.
So if you had to boil it down to like one project management technique for like the busiest, most overwhelmed middle manager, let's just say they're listening and they're like, okay, I'm going to go implement something tomorrow. Mm-hmm. What would you say that they would do?
I would say number one thing to do is start having conversations with everyone. Usually when you feel that your project management platform isn't working, again, this goes back to project management being a communication tool to organize and align everyone to work together. It means that somewhere something is breaking. And the only way to find that is to communicate more and communicate about that. Start talking with your stakeholders, start talking with your team, and find out what it is that could be causing that.
Well, what do you ask them? So I'm going to press you a little bit here. What would you ask them? So if you're going in and you're saying just talk to them, would you ask them a specific question? Would you say like, hey, is there some process that doesn't feel like it's working? Is it, what would you ask them?
Yeah, I would start leaning into those pain points. If the pain points are data collection and saying, man, I can't take this. I'm spending hours a week collecting this information. Let's start having a conversation around, is that information important to collect? And which pieces are critical? Which pieces maybe we can do without? And then how are we collecting that information? Is there a way to avoid duplication of effort? Is there a way to automate this that we can just roll it up and not have to take any action, but have that information pulled together for us? And start exploring what those options could be.
Okay, so you're really asking them their pain points in general, what's taking up a lot of your time, that type thing?
It's a root cause analysis. Famously, the 5 whys is a very good structure here. So keep asking why 5 times, and that should get you down to the crux of the issue there. And then from there, once it is a simple issue that you can define, then you know that, hey, we've reached that key issue and can do something about it.
Okay. Yeah. I think asking around, seeing what you could find. And, most people will tell you about what's painful, right? Because they want it to be resolved, and they will tell you.
Everyone will love to talk about what's painful.
Exactly. Can't ask them what's going good.
Make sure it doesn't devolve into just a complaining session. Make sure there is some kind of action that we can take out of this.
Right. Was there anything that you want to leave the listeners with that I didn't ask you, or anything about project management in management that you want to leave the listeners with?
Yeah, I would just say if you're hearing this and thinking this really resonates with me, you're probably not alone. If you're frustrated, chances are others are too. So be proactive, be that person who steps up and says, hey, this can be better. Let's figure out what that could look like and take those steps as a team to make that happen.
All right. Well, Paul, where can people find out more about you and your work?
Yeah. Check out my website. It's koetkeconsulting.com. That's KOETKE consulting.com. Or feel free to reach out on LinkedIn. I'd love to connect with you there as well.
All right. Well, I will link both of those up in the show notes. But Paul, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Jen, thank you very much for having me on.